We are back with another Playful Humans podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague, and my guest this week is Alfie Noakes, head honcho at the We Are Funny Project. You can find them at wearefunnyproject.com. He's a comedy coach and expert, as well as an MC and promoter of comedy, and he's got some courses on how you can be a comedian. If this is something you've always dreamt about, to find your play and find your funny, go to wearefunnyproject.com. Also, if you're looking to rediscover the power of play as an adult, find your playful personality, or just beat burnout and try to avoid a midlife crisis, go to playfulhumans.com. Here we go. Don't wait for Alfie, welcome to the show. We like to start with the joke of the week. The joke of the week this week is brought to you by Fire Safety. I don't know if they have this in the UK or not, but based on the number of times we practice stop, drop, and roll in the United States, I was expecting to be on fire way more than the 0 times I have been so far. Stop, drop, and roll. Okay, here's the official joke of the week. When I was a little kid, I used to pray for a bicycle. And then I went to Sunday school and learned that's not how prayer works. So I stole a bicycle and asked for forgiveness. There you go. Do you have a joke you'd like to share?
Yeah, I can give you a joke. Why did the narcissist cross the road? Because they like crossing boundaries.
There you go. All right, a new one. Always.
I'm sorry, I've got to ask, what's stop, drop, and roll?
So this is like, if you're caught on fire, if you're a physical person, like your shirt is on fire, you're supposed to stop, drop to the ground, and then roll around on the ground to put the fire out.
And people have to be educated on this.
Yes, and in America, well, because most people, when they catch on fire, they start screaming and running around, and that just fans the flames.
Okay, because we have fire engines and firefighters here as well, but we don't need PSAs about it. Amazing. Okay. Well, if I'm ever on fire if I'm ever on fire in the United States, literally,
you have to learn how to stop, drop, and roll every year, for sure. All right. Well, that takes us to comedy here in general and how you play for a living, coaching people to get into it, encouraging people to do stand-up comedy. So I guess the good first question is, why would you recommend people give it a shot, or what are the benefits of stand-up comedy?
Why would I give people the idea to give it a shot? It depends. There's obviously different types of people who might want to do it. A lot of people assume I very much work in the open mic universe. I often have pros and semi-pros headlining my shows, and I've done loads of pro shows, but most of my shows are open mic, which, just for clarity, means that as long as they organize themselves and ask in the appropriate way with appropriate notice, anybody can get up on stage. So most people who are gigging have come and asked me. They've made the decision they want to have a go at comedy. I think what people often misunderstand is most people doing open mic want to become professional comedians, and that's just not the case. I would say something in the region, 80% or so are hobbyists. They like doing open mic instead of maybe playing golf. They like to go out for an evening of the week, laugh at the other comedians, making them laugh, and then, you know, it's always nice to be made to laugh. That's a great feeling, but it's nowhere near as good as making other people laugh. So they get to do that as well, and then hang out in the bar afterwards. So there's a lot of value in doing that as a hobby, as a pastime, maybe with professional aspirations. But of course, there's immense transferable skills, you know, public speaking in general, you know, creative thinking, building up your confidence. If somebody just does one open mic spot, just conversationally, for example, if I'm say a dinner party and I mention I work in comedy, people are automatically interested. My former career was like a TV producer and documentary director. People were always interested in that. It would invite a conversation. So if you say you do comedy, you've automatically made yourself that little bit more interesting. And you typically get 2 responses as well. The most common responses are, tell us a joke then, which is a highly annoying one, because it doesn't have the whole kind of setting of a comedy club and the dynamic and the energy that's being built up. And then the other common response is, I couldn't ever do that, because obviously public speaking is intimidating to most people. So just having a go at it once, helps people pass through some kind of psychological barrier. I recommend most people, if they're going to do it say half a dozen times, get a feel for different rooms, learn some really fast lessons, see what's working, fix a few things up, and then they'll have a taste if they're into it. And a certain amount of people get what we call the comedy bug, and all of a sudden they're out 4 or 5 nights a week gigging as much as they can. They leave their families behind, and this is the focus.
I love that. And I guess we should mention a couple of things here, because I have some interesting questions. I've always wanted to do it. My brother did stand-up comedy. I was on the radio and I DJ'd and did karaoke and MC work and stuff. So I kind of consider myself like a more of an MC and an entertainer, but I can obviously tell jokes, and I don't really see it as that different. I think what's interesting about me is I'm not afraid to bomb anymore. I've done so many bad rooms DJing and entertaining and emceeing that it's like that's the audience. I've done the same jokes, told the same stories in front of people where they were like rolling laughing, and they were all like drunk and crazy and clapping and screaming and going nuts on a New Year's Eve or a St. Patrick's Day or something. But then I've also told the exact same story and had crickets and just died a miserable death. And you're like, okay, whatever. It's not me. It's the situation and stuff, and the timing, and like you said, all the contextual clues. So I kind of feel like I'm past that part of it, but I find there's something very interesting about the timing of jokes in the situation that I want to try stand-up comedy, and I want to try improv comedy, because I think those are two different skills. And you have courses on this, so that's where I was going. Is they're not very expensive. People can go on there and buy them right now, do some work online, and maybe write a 5-minute comedy set. But can you help us out with what is the difference? What are maybe some of the myths or misconceptions, or what makes stand-up comedy and a 5-minute comedy set harder or different than, say, giving a 5-minute speech in class, or trying to be funny in a work speech or something like that?
Well, you said yourself there, you feel that you can tell jokes, and that's fine. That's part of the skill set, but also writing jokes is critical, because joke thievery is completely unforgivable, and you'll be amazed how easily comedians are caught, because most people in the scene are comedy geeks. We know who's done what when it's got some kind of profile. And then the other side of the equation, of course, is actual performance. So we get quite a lot of people entering open mic who are the funny guy or girl in their group. Their friends have said you should have a go at comedy, and they come along and they very quickly get something of a cold slap in the face, realizing it's something of a different dynamic. They very quickly fix that error. They only takes them a few gigs to kind of make that pivot. But, you know, at the end of the day, a stand-up comedian is the only person facing that way in the room. They're under a spotlight. If the open mic room is of any quality, it should at least have a stage, so they're elevated. And, of course, they're amplified. And, you know, you need to get a certain amount of jokes and a rhythm. I'm in London, so it's a very hotbed of comedy, highly competitive scene. So we typically start acts out on 5-minute sets. But in different places, it could be maybe 7 or 10, which is a real stretch for a new comedian. I would, on average, say it should take, and it's a very piece of string answer here, but something like a year, a couple of gigs a week for a year to get to what we call a tight 5, where you've got like a really solid 5-minute set where you get laugh after laugh. They're tried, they're tested. And, you know, at the pro level, you're looking for 3 big laughs a minute. That would be kind of over the top in an open mic room. But if you're getting 15 laughs, not necessarily big laughs, but okay laughs, like if it was marked out of 10, between 5 and 10, if you get 15 of those in 5 minutes, then somebody like me will move you to a 10 spot. And then when you can repeat that in a longer form, I'll move you up to a headliner type of thing. And just something else as well to say, an awful lot of people overwrite and overthink this. The average person speaks at 3 words a minute. So a 5-minute set is 900 words. Sometimes I've got students coming to me with 17 pages of notes. I'm like, no, get it down to a couple of thousand, and then we'll edit it down and we'll focus on the strong bits, chop these out, strengthen this. So a lot of people work too hard. Sometimes it's a case of less is more.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. When I see professional comedians, also when you only have 5 minutes, you can't rush it. You're not trying to get words per minute. It's really laughs per minute, which could be slower or could be subtle even not jokes, written jokes. It's your personality, your persona, and what you're doing, or hand movement that can get a laugh, right? And I think that's
You've
the
got
hard
the
part.
physicality, acts out, tones. I'd say a very high-end punchline is actually not having to say the punchline at all, just kind of trailing off just before you get to. In fact, people all know punchline, set up punchline, but there's actually a punch word. So within the punchline, there was a critical word where the twist, the surprise, most comedy is predicated on surprise, when that's revealed. And it's really quite important to make the very most of it, to make that the last word in your punchline. It should also ideally be a short word. And then, when we want to get into the real details and really get all the juice out of the joke, try and make it a plosive packed word. There's 6 letters that are plosives, but B's and P's are really, really helpful. So if the punch word could be this or that, and that could be bubble, pump, pop, the name Bob, words like these, we don't know why, but they're just inherently that bit more funny. So there's all of these kind of tips and advice in my courses, the beginners, advanced, or otherwise. Most of them are a case of giving you the master classes first and then kind of winnowing down to more and more detail. My comment there about a plosive, maybe that makes a 5% difference to a joke. But if you've got 20 great tips like that, well, that's 100% difference. So it's fairly easy to move on step by step. My courses are step by step to make sure that from beginning to end, there is a measurable and pronounced development.
I love that. I think there are tactical and structural things you can learn, which is really interesting to me. I think this podcast is also about kind of finding your voice and your talents and being kind of who you've wanted to be. And I know in your course, you also mention part of like finding your personal brand and what kind of comedian you are. Are you a prop comic? Are you a funny one-liner comic? Are you a story comic? There's lots of different ways to make people laugh. How would you recommend people go about thinking of like who they want to be?
Easy,
because
that easy.
I think that's hard.
Sorry to jump in on your question though, but it's dead easy. They should be themselves. There might be a slightly elevated, exaggerated version of themselves, unless they're deciding to be an outright character comedian. And even then, the Alan Partridges in British comedy, absolute gods of British comedy, Alan Partridge by Steve Coogan, David Brent by Ricky Gervais. They're both quite clear that these are kind of exaggerated aspects of their kind of negative characteristics. Very often I'll suggest, I try and teach never to approach, to decide like I'm going to write comedy. Wednesday night, I'm going to put some time aside and write comedy for a couple of hours. It's a terrible way of approaching things. Then you approach the blank page and go, where do I begin? It's really wise to come to the page with a whole load of ideas written down already, and then you decide to flesh out from there. So, for example, it would take 3 minutes to write a list of firsts and worsts is one of the things that I would teach. To write down your 10 worst dates, holidays, meals, things somebody said to you. Those are your firsts. They can also be your worsts. Jot down 10 or 20 of those and then go, actually, that stung when I was a teenager. That was a painful experience, but it's probably a common experience. I've gotten over the trauma. Now I'm 32 or whatever the age happens to be. Yeah. And there's inherently a story there. You can then pump it up and exaggerate. You can take, aspects of your friends' stories and make them into your own. But never approach the blank page. That's an awful way to go about things. Just pull on aspects of your own life. And by definition, it's going to be authentic. Obviously, you might become less authentic as you veer into fiction to pump up the story, but that's completely fine. But you are drawing on your own life, your own experiences. You're clearly not going to be like another comedian because it's you. I'm very mindful in my courses that I wouldn't just create cookie cutter comedians. They're very much designed to draw elements of each student's own personal life experience and opinions so it can be inserted into their comedy. So there's just a couple of ideas for you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I was going to ask you a little bit more about the difference of being unique, or the power of being unique, because that's one of the things I talk about a lot. Is I think we want to follow this checkmark path to success. And you're even outlining some of those things like, well, if you want to get into comedy, you need to follow kind of this route. Or if you want to write a joke, you need to follow this route. But sometimes that can lead us to being robots or being copies of a copy. And we don't need another David Brent because Ricky Gervais already exists. So we need you to be more of you. Can you talk about how comedians maybe even in an open mic, stand out from others by being themselves and what the power of that unique voice is?
Sure, but first of all, I'd just like to address you described then as you spoke, like, this is what you need to do. That's not necessarily the case. What I would teach is, here are some effective and functional methods, and I'm crystal clear there are many other ones, but these are ones that most people can get behind and understand quickly. There are many, many ways to address comedy, and my advanced course is over 5 hours long. It's designed to be done session week by week, so it's really to be done over 3 months or thereabouts. But the idea that there's a need to process, no, people can find their own way. It's ideally you want to learn to run before you walk, and it's good to understand some golden rules and then start breaking some of those rules. And so, to your question, how does a comedian stand out from others on stage? First and foremost, being funnier than the rest is it. Sometimes people will be playing with characters. I mean, almost harking back to your previous question, I would suggest phase one of comedy is a year, 100 gigs, 2 gigs a week. That's kind of phase one. And at that point, most comedians, as I mentioned, might have something resembling a type 5, but they should have maybe tried different techniques. I'm going to be a bit more observational. I'm going to do a few gigs that the whole 5 minutes is spent telling a story. Some of them might just start to go kind of joke to joke, fast fire for a while. But equally, it's every open mic night. I too often see this with the other comedians just going through their own set in their head in anticipation of going on stage. And then when they leave the stage, they just start drinking, chatting to their mates, and just kind of relieved that it's done, or applauding themselves it went well, or kicking themselves when it didn't. They're missing huge opportunities, which is paying close attention to the other acts. Because as I mentioned, joke theft is utterly verboten and forbidden. But you can absolutely take ideas and inspiration going, oh, I see what they did there. That was really smart. I could do my version of that. So really, to stand out from the other acts, first and foremost, it is just being funnier. And then you might bring in some characteristics. A bad example, I would say, there was a comedian who seemed quite determined. He wouldn't listen to me. He seemed quite determined to be like an antisocial kind of character, didn't move, just stood at the mic, kept his head down, no eye contact with the audience, which is a massive mistake. I've seen people try and be character acts and wear sunglasses. Terrible mistake. Even somebody wearing a baseball cap and then the peak of the cap shields their eyes. No good. Lose the cap. And he had some okay jokes, but because he was so dead in his delivery and there was no kind of connection at all, those jokes were never going to fly. If there were 7 out of 10 in quality, he was getting 1 out of 10 responses. So being funnier is the most standout, I can say. And then you can add some flourishes as you see fit.
That's really great. I think that's cool advice. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your career here, because you've done some cool things and have a playful career. And we talk on this one about how to play for a living. So tell me about your work first in film and becoming a film expert in your studies, why you chose that, how you made money with it, and then how you became a comedy expert for a living.
Well, I became a comedy expert because I was just banging into movies when I was a kid. I saw every film that came out. I read all the movie magazines. And then 30 years ago, there was a TV show here in the UK, which went around the country to smaller regional towns and picked up kind of 4 funky, good-looking younger kids, and then brought them to London to review the films, which were primarily aimed at them. Most film audiences are, 14 to 30. And our top film critic at the time, great film critic, a man called Barry Norman, but he was like 800 years old and was coming from a rather intellectual point of view. He wasn't going to love Jurassic Park. He just wasn't. And then they liked me so much. I knew so much about movies. They offered me a job on the 2nd season, just making the run, making the teas, picking up the post. I was the runner. And then I was one of the producer directors by the last series. And then through that, I managed to carve a niche, specializing in movie programming. So either writing questions for the presenters, sometimes doing the interviews and then reshooting reversals with my presenter to look like they did it, but it was me. And then, making a number of documentary writing and directing them. So I did that for 13 years, quit when I found out I was going to be a dad, set up a new business in a completely different industry, just in time for the 2008 banking crisis. So that sent me bankrupt. And then in that period, myself and a friend set up an open mic night just as a hobby. I'd always been a big comedy fan. And then on that first night, I'm really there just kind of help. I I wanted to be on stage, but I was a bit scared, to be honest. I do understand what it's like for new comedians. I remember how intimidated I was. And then when I did get up, I went, yeah, this really isn't as scary as I imagined at all. Ran that as a hobby for a while, and then I split with that guy, and I've been running like an amateur network with some pro shows amongst it. And then I did workshops, bringing in professionals to teach comedy to the open mic guys, and then ultimately started teaching myself. So, but very quickly in the early days, I saw the overlap between stand-up and film. You know, every young, or not even young, a lot of open micers are much older than you might imagine. Lots of people enter the scene in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. Sometimes they've just gone through a divorce, they want to reset, something like that. But, you know, every open micer is their own producer, director, screenwriter, leading role. And then ultimately, once they get into the industry, they're navigating marketing, promotion, competitions, critics, agents, and all the rest. So that's what I've predicated my advanced course on. It's the cinematic system of stand-up, but I've called it stepping forward in stand-up. So I managed to take my two personal passions and then get myself a career out of both. I'm a lucky man indeed.
I love that so much because I love it when people do that. They combine things. I've done that in my career. I did radio and DJ work. I've done corporate speaking and sales training. And it's like, oh, well, I can create a podcast about sales training and use both of them at the same time. And all of a sudden I have skill sets that nobody else has. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
Fred, to get
your own recipe of skills.
Yeah.
Which is why you should do stand-up. That's why you should do stand-up as well, because it's going to add, you know, I'm sure you're a wholly entertaining presenter. I've already watched plenty of your shows. But if you can add even more jokes and better jokes into your public speaking, there's so many transferable skills in comedy. I say many people, there's no common person in open mic. I think the youngest actor I've ever had is 7 and the oldest was 82. You know, gay, straight, black, white, British, non-British, everybody's welcome, everybody's in. But if there was anything resembling a common denominator, I'd say that the day job as a teacher. Obviously intelligent people, they've got something to say, they know how to public speak, even if it's in front of 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds. But I think they relish the platform that they can say stuff that won't get them fired or put on some kind of register. But, you know, some of the skills they're picking up in the open mic room, I have no doubt is helping them in the classroom.
Yeah, and I could see that too. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, but I'm interested in it as well, as that sometimes when I'm doing sales training or serious business topics, or I'm trying to help people and teach, it becomes too serious. And I need to like punch it up and remind myself, no, you used to be funny. And that's kind of where I'm finding my balance, is that when I was on the radio and you're doing top 40 stuff and you make fun of Britney Spears or Justin Timberlake or something. Obviously, I was on the radio in the 2000s. It's pretty easy, but you have, while the music's playing, you have 15 minutes to think of something funny to say about whoever the next song is up. So,
as an MC, I've got fewer than 5 minutes to think of something funny about what the act on stage is. So if they're coming up in 5-minute increments, as an MC, I always set myself a challenge to pay attention to what topics they're touching upon. And then when they finish, and it could be the last thing they said, or it might be the first thing they said, but often I'll come back on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dave. Wasn't he great? Give him a round of applause. Dave was just talking about, and then I've challenged myself to think of something funny in fewer than 5 minutes. And that keeps me sharp. And you just mentioned there about running kind of sales training. I've got a great comedian who gigs with me. He's a particularly fascinating man. He does many pro comedy gigs, but he's also the lead singer of a successful heavy metal band called Acid Rain. But his day job, which really is where the money is, he's a sales and business consultant. And we were having a good chat after a gig one night. He said, every gig I do is just nothing but sales, sales, sales. My setup is the pitch. My punchline is the close. And if you don't laugh, that's not your fault. It's my fault. I've now got to come up with a better offer, tag the joke, rewrite the joke, or whatever it might happen to be. Again, immense overlap between sales and comedy. You know, building rapport with people, you know, it's better than I do, probably, how important that is.
Well, I think that's what is interesting to me too, is there's sort of this balance where comedy is thinking maybe outside the box, but it's scripted, and you do have time to work on this and make it better, where radio or sales training or a sales call, that's happening live. It's improv, and you're going to have to make this up as you go along, and you can prepare, you can develop these skills, but then you got to kind of be in the moment and do it. And that's why I'm thinking for my next two things, improv comedy and stand-up comedy would be fun skill sets to learn and punch up both.
I applaud you on both. I'd like to point out I've got a lot of, there's kind of a competitiveness. I'm sure you've noticed this in the world. That, you know, if you've got two football teams in the same city, they've got a particular antipathy towards each other.
Yeah.
You know, I used to play ice hockey, which is quite rare here in the UK, but we'd have a real antipathy against the figure skaters. But you've got to respect those guys. They're really good at what they do, and they've hit that ice hard hundreds and hundreds of times, but we would mock them and call them twirlers. And there is sometimes seen as a bit of an antipathy between stand-up and improv, which I think is ridiculous. But I would say one of the distinctions between them is stand-ups are coming on stage with effectively a script, a set that they've written and edited and rehearsed and re-edited and so forth. And they're trying to deliver that as though it just seems off the cuff. And good ones will, you know, completely convince the audience that's the case. Whereas improvised people might come in with a few notions in their head, but it is exactly that. It is off the cuff. So they're coming to the same problem, but from different angles. So I've never quite understood why they're quite so disdainful of one another sometimes. I think both teams are amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they're both different skill sets that I want to get better at, because I do writing and blogging, and I'm working on a book for Playful Humans and stuff as well. And I want to be able to write funny jokes and write intentionally in times. And I feel like with all the MC stuff that I've done over the years, I'm sure you feel this way too. Like, I'm pretty good at the off the cuff stuff. I need to work on the writing, the structure, the effort that I don't really work to craft or perfect a joke very often.
Well, with that in mind, I mean, the perfection of a joke comes with repetition. And, you know, for example, as I mentioned earlier, most jokes are based on surprise, the success of them, not all, but very, very many. And it's a case of calibration often. If you've put too much information in your setup, then the audience will guess the punchline before you deliver it, thus no laugh.
Right.
If you don't put enough information in, they can't possibly understand the joke, thus no laugh. So it can be the germ, the seed of a great joke, but you've got to just work it a few times and go, okay, I've got to edit this down. They knew too much. They didn't know enough. You know, half a dozen iterations. There's no number, but let's imagine half a dozen iterations of it going wrong, and all of a sudden you've got a piece of gold that you can use in every comedy set ever if you so choose. But with the things you said there that, you know, you see, you know, my beginner's course has, I think, 22 sections in it. They average out at about 10 minutes a week. Again, it's designed to be, you know, one a day. 3 weeks later, you've made massive advances. You know, there's a challenge at the end of each one. But amongst those 22 sessions, 7 of them are explicit joke writing exercises. You know, so there's no way somebody could do that course and not be able to come away. If you just do one of each of the 7, you've probably got the best chance of filling the 5 minutes straight out of the gate, plus everything else. You know, with this background and skill set you have, you'll pick it up super quickly. Of that, I have no question, Mike.
Well, hopefully we're encouraging other people to do that as well. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I want to give this a shot here too in the new year, make a New Year's resolution to be more funny, go to wearefunnyproject.com. Check out those courses. Alfie also does comedy coaching there. If you need some personal help with that, there's some bundles on that, which I think are awesome. Anything else I forgot to ask you wanted to mention or stuff there?
You could ask me anything you liked. I would say that if anybody goes to the website, as you said, wearefunnyproject.com, if they give us their email address, then they can download a free ebook immediately. I changed it recently. It's now the 8 most powerful ways to turbocharge your stand-up. So whether you've not done stand-up, you've just begun, or you're 3 or 4 years into open mic, there's still great information in there for you.
Awesome. I love it. Go check out Alfie and the website. Now, are you ready to play a game?
I was born ready.
Okay, good. Now, you mentioned you're a movie expert. I think you even studied this. I have some movie trivia for you here.
I'm going to look so foolish if I get these wrong, given what I said earlier, but hit me.
Well, the problem with the survey-based questions is it's not the right answers that matters. It's the ones that are most popular and common.
Okay.
So we asked 100 people to name a movie starring Chris Pratt. What do you think they picked?
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Number one answer. There you go. 40 points for that
I think
one.
many of them were saying Moneyball. or Zero Dark 30, just to show my movie knowledge.
Just to show off. I like that. Zero Dark 30 did come in at number 7. Okay. Name 2 actors that are famous for playing a romantic couple together.
Sorry, 2 actors that are famous for playing a romantic couple together.
Yeah.
Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally.
Yes, that's number 4. I think they were in a couple. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan made number 1.
And You've Got Mail.
Yeah, and Ryan
That's
Gosling
horrifying.
and Rachel McAdams will be on there forever.
That's a horrifying
or you can go
statistic.
Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. You want to go old school?
Yeah, exactly. So You've Got Mail came in ahead of When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, that's a shame.
I
should be wrong.
despair of surveys.
But they were in multiple movies, right? They did Sleepless in Seattle and others.
And Joe versus the Volcano, which is a film that does indeed merit being forgotten.
That's awesome. All right. Name an action movie from the 2010s.
From the any action film from the 2010s? Die Hard 5.
Well, there you go.
I'm sorry, I've got to go for the most popular one, don't I? I'm forgetting that aspect. Yes. Jurassic World.
Oh, there you go. Jurassic World was on our previous one with Chris Pratt, but no, Avengers, Bourne, Iron Man, Fast and Furious, and X-Men made the top of the list.
Okay,
all right,
so
last
basically
one.
Marvel and Cars. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't really consider some of those action movies, but I guess they are. Name a movie that would be terrible to watch on a first date. This is of all time worst movies to watch on a first date.
Well, my answer to that would be a Serbian film. That's the title of the film. I'm not just saying a film from Serbia. It's like some awful torture porn kind of movie. You want to stay clear of that. Otherwise, a worst film on a first date that the American public have voted for.
Yes.
Let's go Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, so close. I'll give you the point for that because we have Halloween, Saw, The Exorcist on here. But Schindler's List came in at number 1. Not a great first.
Yes, that is indeed. The voting American public have gone right back up in my estimation after their earlier efforts. That is indeed the worst date movie.
There you go. All right, Alfie, thank you for playing. Again, go check him out at wearefunnyproject.com. You can check out playfulhumans.com. There's a playfulness quiz there. You can find your playful personality, different ways to play. Maybe you're a comedian, a joke teller, a joker. Maybe you like puzzles and games. Maybe you like sports and athletics. You can find out what your playful personality is at playfulhumans.com/quiz. Also, I host team building events. If you want to play with Lego or do a game show or something with your team, check it out at playfulhumans.com. And we'll see you next time. Go play, everybody.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep on chasing the sunshine.